Hello guys, this is the assembly video for the Archangel 50mm EDF 3D printed RC plane. So first step is to print out the servo bed, and I printed this out of PLA Pro because it needs to be more strong since it houses the servo and the elevators, and these parts take most of the stress, especially when landing. So first step is you need to run the cable of the servo through the tunnel. And you'll notice that the servo bed part didn't print that well, but that's alright. Because I just filled those holes in over here in the layers with hot glue. And it worked out just fine. So then as you try to slide the servo in, you'll notice it's a pretty tight fit. So I did try to cut out a little bit right here with a knife. And I ended up squeezing the servo in. So once everything's fitted in, you just hot glue it. And you do the same for both sides. And once you do that, just attach some extension cables, and yeah, it should look like this. And you should also plug it into your receiver and then just test to make sure your servos are mixed correctly and the neutral position is as shown, where the servo arms are pointing basically straight up. The next step is the aft. So basically all you have to do is push the EDF with the ESC attached into this hole. Yeah, so as you can see, it doesn't need to be pushing all the way in. You just need to just make sure it's glued in firmly, and make sure that when you spin the fan blades by hand, it's not the housing and it spins freely. Alright, the next step is to run the servo wires and extension cables through the servo tunnel on the aft part. And once that is finished, as shown, you simply just take some epoxy or super glue or whatever, and just join these two together and make sure it's aligned. So you keep running the servo wires through the servo tunnel in the midsection, and then you run the ESC through this tunnel above in the midsection as well. And once that's done, you also just align it and glue it together. And I like to keep the whole assembly standing up like this so that the weight of it holds it together while the glue is curing. The next step is for the nose. So there's an optional little pin that you can print, and this can be printed out of either lightweight PLA or normal PLA. The whole point of this is to make it easier to align. And if you feel confident in aligning it without the pin, this is completely unnecessary. So you don't really need it. But for me, I just found it easier to align it with the pin. And it's just a few minutes print anyway, so you might as well just do it. So I just glued it in as usual after aligning it, and left it in the standing up position to cure for a few minutes. Next are the wings. So you need to be careful with the orientation of the wings. There's a built-in wingtip washout, which means that the trailing edge near the wingtip should rise above the leading edge, as shown in this picture. See how it's slanted downwards? Yeah, that's how it should look like. So then you simply align it. So yeah, anyways, I just glued it on and held it together until the glue was partially cured and was holding onto itself. Then you should do this on the other side as well. And again, if there are any gaps due to warping, just fill it in with a thicker gap filler glue or something, and it should be fine. Yeah, so I still left it in the standing up position because after holding it together with my hands for a few minutes, the glue was cured strong enough to hold the wings on itself like this. And just make sure that everything is nice and symmetrical, as shown in the image. So now we need to clean up some of the wiring. So I found out that I could just overlap the wires and squeeze the servo wires into this servo tunnel in the midsection. And I could do the same with the ESC wire. And I just connected everything to my receiver and hot glued it all down. And then I also used the hot glue gun to melt small indentations around here, so that the hatch would fit flush once I glued the antennas in. It's important to glue the antennas in this way since they need to be 90 degrees apart so that you get the most coverage. Now this isn't necessary, but I wanted to put an FPV camera, so here I connected my VTX module and my camera and just tested that the orientation was correct. And yeah, for these VTX, they don't have a signal wire, so the part that connects to the receiver only has 2 white wires coming out. So you just connect that to the power source of any channel, basically. I just connected to channel 6. Now I found out the best way to put the VTX was inside the hatch upside down. So I simply just put it there and I used a pencil to draw a circle where the antenna would poke out. Then I used the hot glue gun to melt a hole right where I drew that circle. Then I folded these white wires and glued them underneath the VTX. After that, I turned the antenna upside down and fed it through that hole. And following these steps, I simply glued the camera and the VTX module all down into place. As you can see, the 2 white wires are coming out back, which is exactly what we want. And yeah, just make sure the camera is like very sturdy and well aligned. Alright, so once that's done, you simply just put in the battery and put the hatch on and to see if everything fits properly. As you can see, everything fits perfectly over here. And for the battery, it's best to put Velcro to keep it in one place during the flight, but I didn't have Velcro at this time, so I simply just used tape to tape it down. I also used tape to keep tape the hatch on in flight, but I designed it so that there's a small recess right there on the hatch for a magnet. And same with on the midsection, there's a small like recess for a magnet you can put right there, and you just glue these 2 magnets in and it should hold the hatch down pretty well. So now there's a hinge for the elevons, and I didn't have pictures of me assembling this since I made these so long ago. But it's pretty simple. You just print these 2 pieces out of PLA or any other strong material and you print them vertically. After it's finished printing, you find a paper clip and straighten it out. And this paper clip is going to be the center axis of your hinge. So I put the paper clip wire right through and then glued one end of the paper clip into the one side of the hinge. This way the paper clip doesn't come out. Then I just glued one part of the hinge into here pictured the elevator. But you can also glue this into the servo bed first. The order doesn't really matter. Next, you need to print out the control horn, as you can see right there. And then you need to get some push rods. So I didn't have push rods, so I just used a paper clip and bent it into this shape as shown. And make sure you make 2 identical push rods, one for each side. Then I put one side of the push rod into the servo arm and one side into the control horn. And if you want a more like twitchy and response and a wider range of motion, you should put the side that goes in the horn onto the lowest hole so that there's a greater angular displacement. Once that's done, you simply position the control horn above where you envision it going in, and then you just take a knife and cut a slit. Then simply slide the control horn in without any glue and test that when the servo is in its neutral position, the elevators are flat. Yeah, and if the elevators are not flat, you simply cut the slit longer and slide it around until it's perfect. And once you got that done, simply just hot glue it down. The final step is to glue on the tail and the nozzle. So I've flown this plane without the nozzle and it works perfectly fine, but I think it's aerodynamically better if you use the nozzle, so I glued it on. Yeah, and you do the same with the tail, and just make sure everything is well aligned. Yeah, so this is what the finished product should look like, and I'll attach a video of it flying. One thing to note is that this plane has a relatively high landing speed, and also make sure that wherever you land it's pretty flat, since sometimes I found out that if there was a big clump of grass somewhere, it would catch on to the elevator, so when I put them in the fully up position and sometimes rip them off. So just be careful that you're landing somewhere that's perfectly flat, and make sure you don't pull up too hard right when you land so that your elevators don't get ripped off. Even if they do get ripped off, the servo bed part, since it's printed out of strong material, it should be able to withstand it, and you're just going to print a new elevator and install it again, and it should be pretty easy. I guess you could land this on like concrete, but if you're planning to do that, I recommend putting some packing tape on the fuselage so it doesn't get scratched up, since landing on pavement's basically like sandpaper. Yeah, and maybe it'd be useful to strengthen the leading edge of the wings a little bit as well if you're landing on pavement, and you could just do that by adding a layer of epoxy or packing tape as well. So there you have it. Enjoy your new airplane, and just be careful when flying it and ensure that you're flying this in a pretty big field, since it does go very fast and high. And thanks for watching.
Yeah.